Hello students, this is your introduction to poetry. Today we'll be talking about some of the basics of poetry and some of the terms that you'll need to know. Please follow along in your worksheet so that you can fill in the blanks, as this will be worth points. Poems should be read aloud with punctuation. When you see a comma, you need to pause slightly. If you see a period, you need to stop. It's the end of the thought. It doesn't matter if it's in the middle of the phrase or not. Poetry is different from prose because it is broken into stanzas instead of paragraphs. It uses fewer words, and it usually is trying to emphasize a feeling or a mood. Poetry uses a lot of figurative language, similes, and metaphors. It also is considered art with words. There are four main types of poems: free verse, concrete poems, narrative poems, and sonnets. Free verse is written in without a regular rhyme scheme. It doesn't have to rhyme. It doesn't have the same amount of beats per measure, or beats per line. It doesn't have a regular form or a regular meter. An example is, "Let the rain kiss upon you, let the rain beat upon your head with silver liquid drops, let the rain sing you a lullaby." And this is from a poem by Langston Hughes called April Rain Song. You'll notice that it doesn't rhyme. You and head, drops, and lullaby, they all have different endings to them. A concrete poem is a lot of fun. They are shaped like the subject of the poem. So if you look at this poem, you'll see that it looks like a sailboat. And you have to just figure out how to read them is the only hard part. Here's how you start. You start at the left. Sails unfurl, winds swirl. Mast straining, port waning, foaming seas set spirits free. Notice how they took the L and they let it join there at the same place. The poem, for example, about rain could be written in the shape of a raindrop, or a poem about love could be written in the shape of a heart. It doesn't matter what the poem's about, it just has a shape of the subject matter. A narrative poem tells a story. It's just like a regular short story, except that it's written in poetry form. For example, I went to the dances at Chandlerville and played Snap Out at Winchester. One time we changed partners, driving home in the moonlight of middle June. This is from a poem called Lucinda Matlock from Edgar Lee Masters. Notice it's talking about a dance that they went to. We're assuming that Snap Out is a game of some sort or a dance. Sonnets are pretty interesting to read. They're 14 lines long, and they're written in iambic pentameter. Iambic refers to the name of the foot, which is composed of a weaker syllable followed by an accented syllable. So da-da, da-da, da-da. So the first syllable is the one that's you see the emphasis on. Pentameter refers to the number of feet in the line, in this case 5. Penta means 5. There are variations, but usually a basic line of sonnet goes da-dum, 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 with the da meaning the weaker syllable and the dum is the accented. Limericks are usually very funny. They are 5 lines long, and the last word of lines 1, 2, and 5 rhyme with each other. And the last word of lines 3 and 4 also rhyme with each other. You'll see an example at the bottom of the screen. There was an old man with a beard who said, "It is just as I feared. 2 owls and a hen, 4 larks and a wren have all built their nests in my beard." You'll notice beard, feared, and beard rhyme, and hen and wren rhyme. Wren is a bird, by the way. Haiku is something you've probably done before. They're traditional Japanese poems, and they're written usually about nature or the seasons, and they're trying to convey emotion as well. With just a few words, they look at something and they want you to say, "Look at this," or "Think about this." If they're well written, we can't help but do just that. The haiku calls the reader's attention to the story behind the observation. A traditional Japanese syllable had 17 syllables divided into 3 clumps or lines. 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and then 5 syllables. So that's a Japanese haiku. Here's some examples. Sudden spring storm, a family of ducks paddle around the deserted lake. And the one below, I believe, is one that has been translated. Frog sunning on a lily pad as dragonfly darts by. Threp. And again, the bottom one is not a technical haiku because it doesn't fit the 575, but it could have been translated from Japanese. Now, in poetry, you're going to see a lot of literary devices. Some of these you're already familiar with. Alliteration is a sound device, and that's when you have the repetition of a consonant sound at the beginning of a phrase, and it's usually there to emphasize some sort of a sound or an image. For example, there will come soft rains and the smell of ground and swallows calling with their shimmering sound. And they're from a poem called There Will Come Soft Rains by Sarah Teasdale. Notice the S sound. The smell, soft rains, swallows, shimmering sound. They want you to hear that rain sound coming down. Assonance is also a sound device. It's when you have similar sounds that are vowels that are repeated, and they can be anywhere, not just the beginning. I must confess that in my quest I felt depressed and restless. And you can hear the E's, the S. Confess, quest, depressed, restless. They're trying to call attention to those words. Consonance is another sound device. It's when you have a repetition of consonant sounds on the inside of the words. For example, tick, tock, tick, tock. When you have consonants, it's just like alliteration, only alliteration's at the beginning, consonance is at the end. Onomatopoeia is lots of fun. It's when you have a word that sounds like what it does, like the word buzz or click, clack. Onomatopoeia looks like it's a complicated word to spell, but if you look, it's oh no, O-N-O, mat, M-A-T, oh, po, like Edgar Allan Poe, and then I-A. So, oh no, mat, oh, po, I-A. So again, onomatopoeia is when something sounds like what it does. So here's an example from a poem called The Bells by Edgar Allan Poe. Hear the sledges with the bells, silver bells, what a world of merriment their melody foretells, how they tinkle, tinkle, tinkle in the icy air of night. And you'll notice the word tinkle is your onomatopoeia. The adjective is onomatopoeic, so tinkle is the onomatopoeic word because it sounds like what it's doing, which is tinkling. Hyperbole is an expression, and it's when something is exaggerated greatly. So if you said they touched the sky with their long arms, you know that can't really happen, but they might have long arms. Or her purse weighed a ton. And that's, you know that her purse can't weigh 2,000 pounds, but you know that it can be heavy. Or he was so hungry he was ready to eat his hat. And again, you know he's not going to really eat his hat, but it's an exaggerated thing. You know he's really hungry. Imagery is something you've used before. It's when an author or a poet uses language that appeals to one of the five senses: touch, taste, smell, hearing, or sight. For example, skimming on asphalt sea, I swerve, I curve, I sway, I speed to the shirring sound an inch above the ground. And that's from a poem called The Sidewalk Racer by Lillian Morrison. And she is talking about playing a sport like skateboarding, or some people have thought roller skating or rollerblading. You can just kind of see what's happening. Skimming on the asphalt sea, I swerve, I curve, I sway. You can see it happening. I speed to shirring sound an inch above the ground. You can almost feel the way that the movement was happening. You can also hear it skimming on an asphalt sea. You've got alliteration there too. A lyric poem is literally song lyrics. It's when they want to express a poet's thoughts or emotions in a musical way. This is a song called Let the Good Times Roll by the Cars. Let the good times roll, let the good times roll, let the good times roll. Let the stories be told, they can say what they want. Let the photos be old, let them show what they want. You know what a metaphor is. It's when you compare two things, but you don't use like or as. For example, I am a tulip. Now, I don't know why you'd want to call yourself a tulip, but that's a metaphor. She was a butterfly, moving from group to group in the cafeteria, never staying in one place too long. So you know that she's not really a butterfly, but she's flying around from group to group like a butterfly would. Also, Sandy was on fire. She danced around and everyone's eyes were on her. You know that she really isn't lit up. She's just dancing a lot, and she's really excited about what she's doing. So the metaphor is trying to show that to you. Similes, another comparison, uses like or as. The willow's music is like a soprano, delicate and thin. And that's from a poem by Eve Merriam called Willow and Ginkgo. A rhyme scheme is when you have a pattern of rhyme that's designated by giving it letters. So, for example, the glory days were in her face, the beauty of the night was in her eyes, and overall her loveliness, the grace of morning blushing in the early skies. You can see that face and grace rhyme, so we give those two A. And then eyes and skies rhyme, so we give that rhyme line B. So it's an ABAB rhyme scheme. When you have end rhyme, it's when the last word at the end of each verse is the word that rhymes. It's pretty much what you're used to. This is a Langston Hughes poem called Dreams. Hold fast to dreams, for if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. Hold fast to dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field frozen with snow. And you can see dreams, of course, got the same word, but that's also still rhyming. And then you've got die and fly, and that rhymes. And you've got go and snow, and they rhyme, and these are all at the ends of the lines. Internal rhyme is when there's a rhyme on the inside of the sentence. For example, glowing labyrinth under gnarled tropical tree, share the jubilee under the vast canopy. Amidst the crystal river mist, among indigo forests kiss, poetry rhythms ripple far above the azure sea. Soothe pain, weave peace, linger long into the evening, and whisper life infinitely. And that's actually was written by an 8th grader named Michael Angel from a book called River of Verse. You can see Jubilee and Canopy rhyme, even though they're in the same line. You've got one in the middle and one at the end. Amidst and mist rhyme, and forests kissed. Even though I kind of question that one, it's still a rhyme, and it's two words inside the same line of writing. A stanza is exactly like a paragraph in a story, only it's broken down and it's shorter. Stanzas could be anywhere from 2 lines, which is a couplet, or 4 lines is pretty typical, 6 or even 8. These lines are 4 long, 4 lines in the stanza. This is from a poem called Because I Could Not Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson. Because I could not stop for death, he kindly stopped for me. I have to go back. Here we go. The carriage held but just ourselves and immortality. We slowly drove, he knew no haste, and I had put away my labor and my leisure too for his civility. So in this poem, Emily's talking about when she dies, and because she didn't want to die, but she had no choice because it was the end of her life, and the carriage is like the angel of death coming to get her. And she says, when it says, I put away my labor and my leisure too for his civility. Again, she didn't want to die, but she had to get into the carriage and go on to the beyond. And she had to give up working and having fun because that's what death wanted. Tone and voice. These can be kind of tricky, but they're not that hard if you think about it. Tone is the attitude that a writer takes toward an audience, a subject, or a character. They can be serious, they can be silly, they can be informative, or they can be biased. Voice is the perspective that's taken on by the poet. So tone is the way they write it. Voice is kind of like you can tell how they feel about it. And it's the way that they write. They write like they talk. So tone is what makes you feel that mood that we've talked about before. Just like when your parents say, don't take that tone with me, and it puts them in a bad mood. when you use a snippy tone and get in trouble because they feel like you're being disrespectful, that's puts them in a bad mood. So the voice is kind of the way that you portray yourself, the way that you speak and write like you speak. And like I said, mood is the way that a reader interprets it and makes them feel. So the writer's tone affects the mood of the piece. And this is an example from Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven. Once upon a midnight dreary, pardon me, I had yawn. While I wandered weak and weary over many a quaint and curious volume of forgotten lore, and while I nodded, nearly napping, suddenly there came a tapping. And the way that the author has written this, it makes you feel kind of interested, and you might be a little nervous because you don't know what's tapping. They go on to find out it's the raven who talks about death. So the mood is the feeling created in you, the reader, by the way a poem is written. So our goal is to be able to annotate poems. So what you're going to do is look for sound devices. For example, rhyming, alliteration, assonance, consonants, and onomatopoeia. Look for figurative language like metaphors, similes, and personification. You want to look for images and symbols. Sometimes you're going to have pieces of things in stories or in poems rather, that stand for more than what they are. So you also want to look for a theme. What is the message the author is trying to get across to you? So now we're going to review. Which of the following is an example of a simile? The car was a flaming bullet. The car was like a flaming bullet. The car was on fire. Or the red hot car was speeding. And if you chose B, you would have the correct answer. The car was like a flaming bullet. Which of the following would be an example of onomatopoeia? Pigs ate pickles in the pigsty. Snap went the rubber band. Or the girl was as smart as a whip. Now remember, onomatopoeia is when the words sound like what they do. So if you chose B, you would be correct. A is a really good example of alliteration, but it's not onomatopoeia. Which of the following is an example of imagery? I rise to make 4 prayers of thanksgiving for this fine clear day, for this good brown earth. Or I am of the earth, she is my mother. Or come, let us roam the night together. Now remember, imagery uses one of the 5 senses in order to make you smell it, hear it, see it, taste it, feel it. So your best option, if you want to get it right, it's A. I rise to make 4 prayers of thanksgiving for this fine clear day, for this good brown earth, because you can see the earth kind of in the poem. Which of the following is an example of alliteration? Remember, alliteration is when the first word, the first letter sound of the words are repeated. How the water lilies fill with rain. Sarah Cynthia Sylvia Stout would not take the garbage out. Or rubbery blubbery macaroni. And if you chose B, you would be correct. Sarah Cynthia Sylvia Stout would not take the garbage out. You've got the sus sound repeated. That's actually from a poem by Shel Silverstein. And if you looked at A, you may have noticed the assonance. Lilies fill. You got 2 I's there. A poem that tells a story. Is it a lyric poem, a free verse, a concrete poem, or a narrative poem? And your answer would be narrative poem, because that's the one that tells a story. Concrete is shaped like what it is, but doesn't have to tell a story. Free verse doesn't go with any kind of particular rhyme scheme or any particular number of beats per measure. And a lyric poem is just song lyrics. Which is an example of a metaphor? The wood as the sea smooths glass. Setting goldenrod upright above you. Or abuelito, who was dough and feathers. So remember, a metaphor, you're comparing 2 things, but you're not saying like or as. So in this one, C would be the correct answer, because you're comparing abuelito, who is grandpa, to dough and feathers. so he must be pudgy and soft. If a poem uses end rhyme, the rhyming words are at the beginning of the lines, at the end of the lines, or within each line. Now, of course, if you're smart, you notice that it's end rhyme. Therefore, it is at the end of the lines, which is B. What is the most likely mood of the poem entitled Sarah Sylvia Cynthia Stout Would Not Take the Garbage Out? Is the mood serious, silly, or dramatic? And if you're paying attention, it's probably B, silly. If a poem uses end rhyme, the rhyming words are at the beginning of the lines, the end of the lines, or within each line. And of course, if it's ending, you know that it's at the end of the line, so it's B. What is the most likely mood of the poem entitled Sarah Cynthia Sylvia Stout? I think we did that. Serious, silly, or dramatic, and it is silly. If a poem is written in free verse, which of the following would be found in it? End rhyme, internal rhyme, irony, or none of the above? Well, free verse doesn't really rhyme, so you wouldn't have A or B. And C, irony could be anything. So we're going to say D, none of the above. A stanza of poetry as blank is to a short story. So remember, a stanza is a section of poetry. So your answer would be A, a paragraph. The fog comes on little cat feet is an example of simile, personification, symbolism, or onomatopoeia. And actually, there's a better answer that's not on here. So if you had to choose from these, I would say personification. But since cats are not people, it's really animism. So we would take that out and make it animism. Now what you're going to do is finish filling out your notes. Then you're going to go to this website and there's a bio poem. You're going to write your own poem. When you finish, take a screenshot of it and you're going to put it up. And this says Google Classroom, but that's old. You're going to put it in Canvas for me. If you do a second one, you might get a little extra credit. So have fun with it. Make it make sense though. Don't just throw things in the words because you won't get credit for it. Make sure it actually makes sense. Thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed this amazing introduction to poetry, and you have a great day.